Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be talking about goalies. Goalies are hard to predict every year, but it feels like this year has been especially tough with some of the top goalies in the league severely underperforming. If you own any one of these guys, you might be starting to get a little bit worried. So I'm here to either reassure you or tell you why it might be time to hit the panic button. Let's get right into it. The first player on this list is Jacob Markstrom of the Calgary Flames. He was a Vezina finalist last year with a record of 37, 15, and 9, with an incredible 2.22 goals against average and .922 save percentage. With the departure of Gaudreau and Tkachuk, Calgary has been struggling this year, and Markstrom has not done them any favors. Markstrom finds himself with a record of 6-4 and 2, but a really bad goals against average of 3.06 and save percentage of .887. If I'm being honest, I've watched a couple Flames games this year, and Markstrom has not looked very good. He's let in a lot of really bad goals, and on paper, Calgary's defense should be solid, especially with adding Mackenzie Weegar, so I think a lot of the blame for Calgary's poor start should be on Markstrom's shoulders. A useful advanced stat when looking at goalies is goals saved above expected, and basically what this does is it takes into account the quality of shots that a goalie faces rather than just their pure save percentage. And if you see here, Markstrom is bottom 10 in the league in terms of the stat. Calgary also is top 3 in shots for in the league and top 5 in lowest shots against, so they really shouldn't be letting in this many goals. Another thing to think about with Markstrom is that last year was the best year of his career. In fact, last year was the only year that he posted an under 2.50 goals against average. I know that most of his career here was on a pretty bad Canucks team, but this could have been his peak, and I don't know if he's ever going to put up numbers like that again. I know all of that sounds pretty negative, but I will say that you don't really need to worry about Markstrom too much. Even if he doesn't put up the same numbers as last year, he's still on a team where he is going to get 60 plus starts, and Calgary is going to be a playoff team. They're still building chemistry with those new pieces that they brought in, but any goalie that's starting that many games on a good team is extremely valuable. I trust in Daryl Sutter's system, and like I said before, Calgary is top 3 in shots for and top 5 in lowest shots against, which means that they are dominating both ends of the ice. All they really need to do is build that chemistry with those new guys and Markstrom to play a little bit better, and Calgary will start getting more wins, and this will be reflected in his fantasy points. Maybe don't expect him to put up numbers like he did last year, but he should still be a top 10 fantasy goalie, and I expect him to bounce back. The next player on this list is Juuse Saros of the Nashville Predators. It might depend on your league settings, but I'm assuming for pretty much all leagues, Saros was the best fantasy hockey goalie last year, better than Shesterkin, better than Markstrom. He was absolutely elite. He had a record of 38, 25, and 3, with a goals against average of 2.64 and save percentage of .918. The most valuable thing for Saros is that he started the most games in the NHL last year at 67, and Nashville just faced so many shots. Combine that with them being a playoff team, it was absolutely magical for Saros last year. With that being said, Saros is definitely struggling right now, with a record of 6, and 1, a goals against average of 3.10, and a save percentage of .905. You might be able to make the argument that Nashville was overperforming last year, with guys like Duchesne and Forsberg hitting 40 plus goals, and Josi almost hitting 100 points, and that they won't be a playoff team this year. But even if there is some truth to this, I have full confidence that Saros will turn it around. The reason I have full confidence in Saros is that he is a notoriously slow starter. If you look at his stats for the months of October and November, they are always really bad. But then if you look right here at December and January, his stats are off the charts. They look absolutely amazing. Even after these hot months, you can see that he plays really good for the rest of the season, so that goes to show that Saros is a slow starter. If you look at goals saved above expected, unlike Markstrom, Saros is actually playing really good despite his poor stats. This just shows that it's more of the Nashville Predators leaving him out to dry rather than him letting in bad goals. Another positive for Saros is that Nashville was 11, 8, and 1 in their first 20 games last year, and yet they still made it to the playoffs. I expect Nashville to start playing better along with Saros. I know a lot of people freaked out when he let in 4 goals on 6 shots against the Seattle Kraken a couple weeks ago, but trust me, this was an outlier. I expect Saros to still be an elite goaltender this year and probably top 5. Now, this is a guy that I'm actually a little bit worried about, and that guy is Tristan Jarry of the Pittsburgh Penguins. In 2020, he became the full-time starter after Matt Murray left the Pens, and last season he had a really good year. He put up a record of 34, 18, and 6 with a goals against average of 2.42 and a save percentage of .919. Jarry found himself being a top 10 fantasy goalie last year, but this year he is not doing very good, and neither are the Pittsburgh Penguins. He currently has a record of 5, 3, and 2 with a terrible goals against average of 3.60, save percentage of .895. He's 6th worst in goals saved above expected, so he's truly not playing well. The Pens do not look good this year with the record of 7-7-3, and this might finally be the year that the aging core of Crosby, Malkin, and Letang start slowing down. What's even more concerning than the Pens' slow start is the health of Tristan Jarry. Jarry and Casey DeSmith have been splitting starts for the last couple of weeks, and this is because Jarry is dealing with a nagging injury. If this is a serious injury, there is a chance that Jarry could miss significant time, and this does not bode well for Jarry owners. It is a good sign that he hasn't been thrown on the IR yet and that he's still playing and working through it, but the fact that he is not healthy and the Pens are playing bad is definitely a bad sign going forward. Like I said, it's probably not a serious injury if the coaching staff is letting Jarry play through these games, but I would be a little bit concerned right now. Hopefully the Penguins can turn it around because I honestly think they still have gas left in the tank. With that aging core, I still think they have another 1 or 2 years of competitive play, and the Penguins should still be a solid team, so hopefully Jarry can get back to health and still be an elite goalie in this league. A goalie that we absolutely have to talk about is Jack Campbell of the Edmonton Oilers. He has been absolutely atrocious this year. He has a decent record right now of 6 wins and 4 losses, but his stats are very bad. He has a goals against average of 4.27, and his save percentage is .873. He's also 3rd worst in goals saved above expected. Normally, I would say this is classic Oilers hockey, with Campbell's poor play being a result of their defense, but when you compare Campbell's numbers to backup Stuart Skinner's, things get a little more concerning. Skinner does have a worse record than Campbell with 3 wins and 4 losses, but his stats are miles ahead, with a goals against average of 2.47 and a save percentage that is 4th best in the league at .932. There is no question that Skinner has majorly outperformed Campbell this season, but for some reason when Skinner's playing, the Oilers forget how to score. Campbell was a career backup until Freddie Anderson got injured on the Leafs in 2020. This gave Campbell an incredible opportunity and he did not let it go to waste. He broke an NHL record for most consecutive wins to start a season, and last year he had another solid year where he posted a record of 31-9-6, a goals against average of 2.64, and a save percentage of .914. But if you see right here, his numbers after the All-Star break were definitely concerning. Campbell left the Leafs in the offseason when he signed a 5-year, $25 million contract with the Oilers, and this contract is not looking very good right now. With that being said, I do think the coaching staff and the front office will give Campbell as many opportunities as possible to justify that contract, but honestly, I would be a little bit worried if I had Campbell on my team right now. The Oilers are trying to win the cup, and if the difference between Skinner and Campbell's play continues to be this noticeable, the Oilers have no choice but to give Skinner more starts. Campbell and Skinner have been splitting starts over the past week or two, but like I said before, they are going to give Campbell as many opportunities to bounce back as possible. So if Campbell has a couple of good games, he will be back to playing the majority of games. With that being said, you might want to consider picking up Skinner if you do own Campbell as a handcuff. You never know what is going to happen, but Campbell should still be the starter for the rest of the season, and hopefully he can bounce back and start playing better. The next player on this list is Sergei Bobrovsky of the Florida Panthers. Last night, he just let in 4 goals on 11 shots and got pulled against the Dallas Stars, so it's not looking too good for Bobrovsky owners, especially with Knight getting more starts. This is the yearly reaction to Bobrovsky playing poorly early on in the season, and then people battling in the Yahoo chats of Spencer Knight and Bobrovsky on who was going to be the starter. So is this year finally the year where Spencer Knight takes over Bobrovsky's crease? Let's break it down. Bobrovsky has a record of 4-4-1 with a really bad goals against average of 3.46 and save percentage of .895. Comparatively, Spencer Knight has a record of 5-2-1 with an amazing goals against average of 2.32 and save percentage of .922. Knight was drafted in the first round in 2019 and he is only 21 years old, whereas Bobrovsky is 34 years old and not getting any younger. It's not a question of if, but when Knight takes over the starting crease in Florida. Despite the differences between the two this season, Bobrovsky actually had better stats than Knight last season. They were obviously a President's Trophy team and that helped out, but Bobrovsky ended up starting 53 games versus Knight's 27. This was about a 65 to 35% split, so what will it be this season? Bob is obviously on a decline, but one saving grace for Bobrovsky owners is that he has one of the worst contracts in the NHL. He still has a $10 million cap hit for the next 4 seasons, so it's pretty hard for the front office and the coaching staff to not give him starts. I know this is probably the lowest point for Bobrovsky owners this season, but I assure you that despite his numbers, he is still a solid goalie. Yes, Spencer Knight is really good, but he's too young to take over that starting role in Florida. I remember in 2020, I owned Bobrovsky. This was my first year in fantasy, and Chris Dredger started 5 games in a row. I ended up dropping Bob for Dredger, and then Bob bounced back and ended up having more started games in the season, so it was a mistake. If you're considering dropping Bob or trading him for pennies, please do not, because Florida is a good team and Bob is definitely going to bounce back. Knight is definitely going to get more starts than he did last season, but I still think it's going to be a 60% to 40% split favoring Bob. It is not ideal that Spencer Knight is probably going to get 40% of the starts, because you obviously want a guy like Hellebuck or Saros who's going to start 60 plus games, but Bobrovsky still has value in fantasy, so hopefully he can bounce back and Florida can start winning more games, and you should see Bob having a better stat line.
Oh, no, no.
The next player we are going to talk about is Thatcher Demko of the Vancouver Canucks. I talked about him on my buy low video last week, and this is what I had to say. The reason I'm saying buy low in Demko is because this is the absolute floor. I don't think he can get worse than this.
Bruh.
So yeah, that was a lie. Demko has actually performed worse than he did last week, and I didn't even think that was possible. I thought that it was his floor, but we have gone straight through the floor, and it's a bottomless pit. We don't know what's going on. He has a record of 1 win and 10 losses, a goals against average of 4.02, and a save percentage of .874. He is dead last in goals saved above expected, which means that the Canucks are not just leaving him out to dry. Demko is truly letting in some really bad goals, and him and backup Spencer Martin have been splitting starts for the past 2 weeks. Obviously not ideal for Demko owners, but for some reason, even though Spencer Martin also has a bad goals against average and save percentage, he has a record of 4-1-1. The Canucks for some reason do not want to win in front of Demko, but hopefully that comes soon. I know somehow Demko keeps doing the impossible and showing us that he can get worse, but I'm going to declare this, even though I said this last week, this is his floor. There is no way that he gets worse than this. The reason I'm saying this is because the Canucks have shown that they can win games in front of Spencer Martin, and Spencer Martin has not played good at all, so Demko is bound to start one of these games if the Canucks win. To be honest, I own Demko in one of my leagues, and it might be time to hit the panic button. I know that Demko is going to turn it around, but there is clearly no way that he plays as good as he did last season, and there is a good chance that the Canucks decide to sell the team and tank, which would not be ideal for Demko owners. His value is pretty much non-existent at this point, and if you have Demko, there is really no point in dropping him. He still has the potential when you look at his last season stats. If you own Demko, you just have to cross your fingers and hope that he starts playing better. If you thought that there wasn't a goalie that has performed worse than Thatcher Demko, then you would be wrong, because that man is Elvis Merzlinkis of the Columbus Blue Jackets. Just like I drafted Demko, I also drafted Elvis, and I told my friends that he would be a league winner. Look, I only thought this because he had a straight up disrespectful ADP of 160 on Yahoo. In my fantasy league last year, him and Sergei Bobrovsky pretty much had the same amount of fantasy points, and yet Bobrovsky was 100 spots ahead of him in the draft this year. That makes no sense. Even though Elvis had a pretty bad goals against average last year, he was still ranked 11th among goalies in my fantasy league. A big reason for this is that Columbus allowed the second most shots in the league last year, just behind the Arizona Coyotes, so Elvis faced a massive amount of volume. He started 56 games last year and had 27 wins, so combine that with the volume and the fact that Columbus added Gaudreau, I took all this information and I thought Elvis was going to be really good, but clearly I was wrong. He has a record of 2 wins and 5 losses with an absolutely atrocious goals against average of 4.74 and save percentage of .864. He's second worst in goals saved above expected behind my good old friend Thatcher Demko, and now Korpisalo is stealing starts from him. The bad news for Elvis is that Korpisalo was actually the starter going into last season before he had that season-ending hip surgery, and now Korpisalo started a bunch of games. Elvis finally got a game, and then he got injured, and now he's out for 1 to 2 weeks. Korpisalo has played pretty well. They just got a win over the Montreal Canadiens, and Elvis will be out a couple of weeks, so Elvis owners must be in complete shambles right now. Overall, this is pretty bad because Elvis and Korpisalo could be splitting starts for the rest of the season. Who knows, maybe Korpisalo will be the starter. Even if Elvis was the starter, it's not even valuable at this point because Columbus is one of the worst teams in the league. They just lost Zach Werenski, they just lost Jake Bean, and they are playing absolutely horrible. If you have Elvis on your team right now, you are completely justified in dropping him. I did so myself about 2 weeks ago in a 10-team league. I really don't think he's going to provide much value for the rest of the season, and if you do drop him and the Jackets start playing better, you can always scoop him back up. We'll see what happens with Elvis, but it's probably going to be a disappointing season for him. Alright guys, that's the end of this video. If you enjoyed this content, please hit that subscribe button below. I hope that some of these goalies that I talked about can pick it back up and come back to their normal selves for the sake of your fantasy teams. And like always, have a good one.